So it's been a busy year of gardening here in 2023 in Northern California, Zone 9B. That's where I am, all of City Oasis, and I'm Kim. Welcome if you haven't been to the channel before. Today I want to discuss what I've learned this past year, what I enjoyed the most, and what needs a little more research before I think I'm going to have good success with it. Overall, I was very pleased with how things went out in my veggie and fruit gardens and out in my fruit and nut orchard. And today I'm going to share with you all about it. Now, definitely the number one thing I continued to enjoy the most in my gardens is growing perennial veggies. Now, of course, I've got my perennial fruit trees and perennial grapevines and berry bushes and such. But I'm talking about veggies here. And for the last few years, I have been trying to add more and more veggies that are perennial in nature, at least semi-perennial, to my garden. And that is something I really enjoyed all the more this year. Now, it would take too long to list for you right here in the video all the veggies that I grow, let alone all the veggies that are possible to grow in different climates that are perennial. But I will leave a list down in the description below of the perennial veggies and the perennial fruits that I grow, just to inspire you, give you some ideas that you can maybe do some research on and see what will grow for you in your area. Because, well, why do I want to grow perennial veggies? I think there are three main reasons. One is that it gives me food year round. Sometimes they are harvested at different times of the year, staggered harvest, and some things are just harvestable all year round, like my purple tree kale or my walking green onions. But another big reason that I love perennial veggies is that it's so much less work. It's less work at the time that, you typically plant veggies in the spring, or if you like to get a head start indoors in the late winter, you don't have to do that. It's already out there growing. It's going to take off when nature tells us it's time all on its own. And that is such a relief, such a workload off of me when I'm busy with other stuff in the garden and otherwise. Perennial veggies also lessen my workload throughout the year. They just tend to be, generally speaking, much sturdier, healthier plants, I've found. So whether it be my herbs like oregano and rosemary, even my lavender, or how about rhubarb and asparagus, and yes, of course, my kale, but also things like green sorrel, my walking onions, artichoke. These are all things that not only do I not have to plant them in the spring, but throughout the year, they require very little maintenance, almost no attention at all. And that is a winter plant, in my opinion, every time. Now, the second thing I have really enjoyed this year in the garden is that I have brought in more birds. And I did that on purpose. I wanted to have more birds in the garden. I love watching all the different species come in. They're so relaxing to watch, so entertaining. So I have a few bird baths and a few little solar fountains. But this year, I want to add even more. Because I've seen how much the birds love the water features, well, I want to give them more. So more of them will come in. And I think I also want to add a little safe area for them, an area that has some branching trees around it, maybe my willow and maybe my bay leaf and loquat near a seed feeder. So if I bring in the seed feeders because they feel safe and can kind of hide in those trees nearby. Also my honeysuckle bush, that's a good one. Well, then once those seed eaters come in, the insect eaters, well, they'll see the seed eaters in there and they'll think, hey, it's safe down there. I'm going to check that out too. And that's another ultimate goal I have, is to bring in more insect eaters, because that's just going to help with any kind of bugs I have in the garden. I've never had really a problem with too many bugs. I occasionally get a few aphids on one or two types of plants. The merit collards were a problem with that, so I moved them to another section of the garden far away from everything else. And buckwheat is a problem, so I'm just not growing that one anymore, except maybe as like a temptation plant to lure the bugs away, but I'm not sure about that yet. But yes, birds. I even got some binoculars this past year and really enjoyed using those to watch the birds play in the water and, check out my flowers, putting more and more flowers, which I've always done some of, but I want to do even more of within the veggie garden, intermingling them. Brings in not only the birds, but also the butterflies, the bees, all kinds of pollinators. So yeah, loved the birds and gonna bring in more. Now, number three thing I really enjoyed in the garden this year was something I have done for a few years now, maybe 4 or 5, but I actually did it really purposefully, really intentionally this year, more than I've done before. And that is grow food for my ducks and chickens, food that I've seen through the years that they really enjoy. Now, if you've watched any number of my videos, you'll know that my chickens love green sorrel. In fact, it is absolutely their favorite snack from the garden. And I don't know why it took me so long to plant more green sorrel bushes, but it did. And so this past year, actually just in the fall, I planted some more green sorrel plants, and already they're getting big and supplying that wonderful nutrition and apparently deliciousness that the chickens enjoy so much. Another thing that the chickens and the ducks really enjoy is watermelon. And to be truthful, that is why I'm growing watermelon. Somebody, I think it was Renee from RB the Garden Nanny, once called me the watermelon queen. That's high praise, and I don't think I deserve that. But for whatever reason, I have this bed. It's right in the right microclimate, I suppose, and it just keeps growing and growing watermelon. Yeah, they come on early and it produces many different harvests. I think this year I ended up getting well over 50, maybe over 60 watermelon, most of them really large, only a few small ones and a few medium ones. And the fact is, not too many people in my family enjoy watermelon that much. I have one kid who likes it, but you know, that's just too much watermelon for them to make any kind of dent in. So I discovered that my chickens and even my ducks really love this watermelon, the Moon and Stars watermelon that I grow. And to some of you, I know that might seem like a waste because you enjoy watermelon so much, and maybe for one reason or another, you haven't been able to get it to grow well in your area as of yet. But when you have chickens and ducks and other such animals, it's so nice to be able to give them organic, fresh fruit and vegetables that you know is healthy for them and is going to be good for them, and you know, doesn't cut into your budget like commercial feed does. So yes, I grew the watermelon, I grew the green sorrel, and I grew a big patch of merit tree collards, which I only use for two things. I use it for compost tea because it makes wonderful compost tea for the garden. And I use it for my ducks and chickens because, again, they love it. Not as much as green sorrel and not as much as the other kale I grow for them, dinosaur kale. They really love that, especially the ducks. But they do enjoy it. And so I have an ongoing amount of greens for them year round from those 3 green products, and then a lot of watermelon throughout the summer and fall. I still have watermelon out there. I'm giving them one every few days, even now. And boy, are they happy about it. So this coming year, I plan to figure out a couple more crops I can grow for the ducks and chickens. I don't really grow anything for my sheep, or my daughter's sheep, I should say, because I have an absolutely unending supply of olive leaves and mulberry leaves, which they totally love and very good for them. So they're taken care of, you know, in addition to the alfalfa pellets and the hay that they get too, and, you know, the pasture. The number 4 thing that I enjoyed the most in my garden this year definitely was the fact that I grew a lot of cherry tomatoes and a lot of peppers. Now, did I grow enough? Nope. I'm going to definitely grow more. I had intentions to grow a lot more of those than I ended up with. And to be honest, I can't really remember all the reasons why that didn't work out. I was raising baby chicks at the same time in the same area, and our weather was really freaky. If I remember correctly, we had some really cold weather after I put my starts out, and I think I lost some cherry tomatoes and peppers that way. This year, I'm going to be really careful. I want a lot of cherry tomatoes and a lot of peppers out there, and I have all the varieties picked that I want. I still have seeds left from last year and seeds I've saved too. So definitely going to do that. And why did I enjoy that so much? Well, of course, I love just eating cherry tomatoes all the time when I'm out in the garden as a snack. But the main reason I loved it is because of making salsa. I've really had a lot of fun experimenting with and making all kinds of salsa the last 2 years and giving it as gifts and having it on hand in the pantry, not having to buy any at the store, knowing that it's really nutritious and healthy with no extra ingredients. I use for it green onions I grow, garlic chives I grow, peppers and tomatoes I grow. What else? Cilantro I grow. And then, you know, there's vinegar, few little ingredients, salt and pepper. And I have the recipe in a previous video on making salsa, which I will link in the description below. And if I think of it, I'll put it up above too. But if you're going to make that much salsa, well, you need a lot of those cherry tomatoes and a lot of those peppers. Also, tomatillas, which this past year I didn't even think about starting for some reason. I have no idea why, because I do love tomatillas in the salsa. But fortunately for me, some volunteered. Tomatilla is one of those plants that just does love to volunteer once you've grown it. But I will not take that chance again. I would definitely plan to plant some this year. Lots of them. Number 5, the final thing I'm going to talk to you about that I enjoyed in the garden this year was growing all kinds of ingredients I could use to make tea blends. I love making tea blends. It's so just fascinating to see what I'm going to come up with. And I like to make sure that they have some delicious qualities and some medicinal qualities, some nutritional qualities, and, relaxing, invigorating. I mean, the types that you can blend up are just endless, and it's really fun to do and really fun to grow these things organically in your backyard. The money you save is enormous from buying tea commercially, and I'm really looking forward to expanding the different types I try this year. One of the main things I want to do is start incorporating more and more of the herbs that I already grow and use in cooking into teas, and investigating more and more leaves from fruit trees and things like that I grow. For instance, when I discovered that my Arbutus trees, my strawberry trees, that their leaves make a wonderful tea, well, that was surprising and great. And then there is olive leaf tea, which is probably one of the absolute best teas you can possibly drink for your health. And I have an infinite amount of olive leaves, so I need to be more on top of harvesting those and blending them up and preserving them. Definitely on my list to do more of this coming year, because I definitely enjoyed it so much in 2023. Now in 2024, in addition to growing more peppers and more cherry tomatoes, I want to grow more winter squash. This year I had some, it was delicious, but well, I didn't grow enough. I don't know what happened, but that's not going to happen again. I'm definitely going to be more thorough, more careful in planning for a bigger harvest next year, because I love using winter squash throughout the whole year for soups and stews, as well as roasted on the side. They're just one of my favorite things to eat. So delicious and so healthy for you. I also need to add pumpkins. For some reason, they got left off the list this year, and I don't want that to happen again, because I love roasting and then canning up my pumpkin, using it in homemade baked goods. So definitely going to be adding pumpkins back into the mix too. Now, as to cutting, there are 3 things I know I'm cutting from my list. One of them is cucumbers, another is small personal-sized melons, and the third is okra. Now, there is nothing wrong with any of those. They're all beautiful plants, especially the okra. They all grow yummy, yummy veggies or fruits when it comes to melons. But nobody eats these things around here, so they tend to go to waste. And although the chickens do like cucumbers, I think I can make better use of the space. And now that I'm growing red roselle hibiscus in great quantities, I have those lovely flowers. I don't miss the okra flowers, which are very, very similar, than being in the same family. And as far as the melon go, well, the one thing I want to add in the melon department to my garden is honeydew. A bigger melon, it will take longer to develop, but it's got a very unique taste that I remember from my childhood, and so I think I'm going to try to add that this year. Now, moving on to what area of gardening do I need to work on the most and do some research on? Well, I found it was with 2 things. One is green beans. I want to grow lots of green beans, all kinds of green beans. And I've had a year here and there with great success, and I've had some years with almost no success. This past year was toward the lower end, let's say. So I need to do some research and figure out what are the best green beans for me to grow in my area, and what is the best microclimate on my property to grow them, and how can I best, feed them and protect them, because again, I want to grow a lot of green beans. So yeah, that's on my list for learning about more this year, doing some research and figuring that out. The other area is it's kind of a combo, berries and currants. So I bought several currant bushes this year, and they did not do well. They started off doing well, and they started developing some fruits, and then they just fizzled out. And I know it could be because it was too hot. We get so hot here. But I had them in what I thought was a good microclimate for them, and where they would get lots of afternoon shade. And yeah, they just died. They just died. By August, they were gone. And it might have been the soil. It might have been too clay-like. Maybe they weren't draining as well as they could, although my soil is a mix of clay and sand where they were, and I feel like drains pretty well, but I'm not sure. It was one particular spot, and I need to check that out because I want to grow currants and gooseberries. My gooseberry plants, one of them did stupendously well, and one of them did so-so. It did fruit some, and then after it was done fruiting, it died. Right next to the other one. And the other one is great. Still beautiful today. So I need to look into that and figure out what happened. I want to grow more of those. They're so delicious and so interesting. Yeah, along with my gomi berries, which did really well this year, I want to grow more gooseberries. So I have to research them more. Finally, 3 lessons I learned this past year in 2023 that I want to take into 2024 with me. Number 1 is that loofahs are very cool and not too hard to grow. So I definitely want to create a little trellis area and grow a lot of loofah on it this year. Not only are they super fun to peel the skin off and see that amazing loofah sponge underneath at the end when you harvest them, but I think having something that is so useful in your home for self-care is just amazing, as well as being, basically free. Because, boy, they have a lot of seeds. Let me tell you, I saved so many seeds from the one plant I grew this year, and I'm looking forward to growing a whole bunch more loofahs this coming year. Number 2 lesson I learned, I alluded to slightly earlier, and that is I want to grow even more flowers within my veggie garden. I've always grown some, of course. My gazanias are just everywhere, all different colors. And then there's the calendula and the blanket flowers, and what else? The zinnias and the chrysanthemums and the gorgeous snapdragons. Yeah, I do have flowers around, but I want to grow more. I just love the look of them, and they really do bring in the pollinators, bring in the bees and butterflies, the hummingbirds. So yeah. And the number 3 thing I learned, the absolutely most important thing I have learned, you'd think I would have learned this before, but you know how it is in life. You tend to need to learn things over and over again before they really stick. And this one is harvest more frequently as you go, whether it's with my herbs that I make into teas or use for spices and cooking, or whether it's with raspberries or cherry tomatoes or rhubarb or asparagus. I tend to put things off. I tend to wait just a little bit too long. And you might think it's because I want to make sure I get it in a YouTube video, the harvest or the pretty veggie or fruit on the plant before I take it off. But that's probably only the reason, maybe 10% of the time. 90% of the time, the reason I put off the harvesting, it's not really procrastination. It is, I believe, a hangover from my childhood when, growing up poor and always wanting to save things. I tend to, when I get stuff, not really hoard it, but I want to save it for a rainy day, save it for when I really need it. I don't want to consume or use that wonderful thing too early and then be without it later. Well, that does not work with garden produce. No. If you don't take it now, either A, someone else will, like a bird or a squirrel or something, or B, it will rot. And that is what happened with some of my red rosella. Some of my red rosella hibiscus. Toward the end, I was not harvesting as frequently as I should have, and it started to mold, and I lost some of it. I still, harvested a whole lot, but it was a little disappointing because it was all my own fault. I should have gone out and harvested it earlier. And so, yeah, and the other thing about harvesting frequently, it's sort of like with deadheading your flowers. The more you harvest, of course, the more most plants are going to produce. So why wouldn't you want to do that, right? And I know that up here. I just have to remember it throughout the year. So those are the things that I super enjoyed in my garden in 2023, and the things that, well, I need to research and figure out better to do a more successful job with next year. Plus the things that I learned from my garden this year in 2023. I think all of this together is going to make 2024 a lot of fun out in my garden and out in my orchards. And one of my next videos, I'm going to be talking about my plans for the garden and for the orchard, as well as some wonderful seed catalogs you might not know about, as well as some tree catalogs that you definitely need to learn about. So you can go ahead and get some wonderful bare root fruit trees, fruit bushes, fruiting vines, nut trees. Oh, just some amazing stuff. So that'll be coming in a video soon. Until then, I wish you all a very, very happy new year. This is one of my favorite times of the year because it gives you a fresh start. And you can really dream big and then figure out how you're going to achieve those dreams. I'm not one for New Year's resolutions, but I am one for planning and goals. And so that's why I like this time of year so much. I hope you do too. So have a great new year, and I'll see you for gardening in 2024.